All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty wild, a new theory of consciousness. And get this, it suggests that everything from the deepest sleep to a chaotic epileptic seizure and even that weird feeling of déjà vu, well, they can all be explained by one single elegant idea: resonance in the brain.
So let's kick things off with a question that's been bugging people for, well, centuries. What on earth could connect the absolute unconsciousness of deep sleep with the violent electrical storm of an epileptic seizure? I mean, on the surface, they seem like complete opposites, right? But what if I told you they're just two ends of the very same ruler?
The answer, it turns out, is that consciousness isn't some simple on-off switch. No, it's much more like a spectrum. Think of it like a sliding scale of brain activity that we're all constantly moving along, whether we realize it or not.
Okay, Section 1, a spectrum of consciousness. So to really get a grip on this spectrum, we've got to start at the extremes. Let's take a look at what's happening in the brain when it's pushed to its absolute limits. So this whole idea is part of a scientific framework called the Brain Kinematics Model. And what it proposes is pretty mind-bending. That all of our mental states, from deep sleep to that aha moment of creative insight, are just different expressions of resonance. Synchronized waves in the brain. All right, Section 2, the brain's two extremes. So this whole spectrum is defined by two opposite poles. You can think of it like a constant tug-of-war in the brain between two totally different kinds of information, the really, really small and the really, really big. So on one side, we've got what's called micro-knowledge. The best way to think about this is like they're the tiny, isolated building blocks of our memories and experiences. They're the individual pixels of a memory, or the smallest little fragment of a feeling, all stored in really specific, localized spots in the brain.
And then, on the complete opposite end of the scale, we have macro-knowledge. This is where all those tiny little blocks, those pixels, get fused together into these huge, interconnected concepts. We're talking about things like your sense of self, or your understanding of a really complex idea, stuff that's spread across massive networks in your brain.
And here's where it gets really interesting. These two types of knowledge, micro and macro, they completely take over at the far ends of this consciousness spectrum. We see it in the profound, restorative quiet of deep sleep and in the electrical chaos of an epileptic seizure.
Just look at this table. It's incredible, right? These two states are almost perfect mirror images of each other. Deep sleep? That's all about micro-knowledge. It's local, it's dispersed, its function is restoration. Epilepsy is the total opposite. It's a global, over-connected macro state that basically forces a system reset. One is this state of quiet dispersal, and the other is just total collapse.
So think about deep sleep like this. Your brain is busy consolidating all those tiny little bits of micro-knowledge. The brain waves themselves are like these slow, deep ocean swells. They're huge and powerful, but there's not a lot of complex stuff happening on the surface, and that's exactly why our awareness is so minimal.
And epilepsy? Well, that's the complete opposite. It's not a gentle swell, it's a massive tidal wave. It's what happens when all those individual patterns of knowledge suddenly fuse together. All the brain's energy gets compressed into one single, overwhelming wave of macro knowledge. It floods the system, often with this intense feeling of familiarity, right before awareness just collapses.
Okay, Section 3, where thought really happens. So, if those are the extremes, total unconsciousness on one side and total collapse on the other, where do we live? Where does our everyday thinking, our creativity, our stable sense of who we are, where does that happen?
Well, it happens right there in the middle, in this really delicate, balanced state that scientists have a great name for, metastable. It's this sweet spot where micro-knowledge and macro-knowledge can actually talk to each other, where they can interact and exchange information without one of them completely taking over the whole system.
And this brings us back to that ocean analogy, and it's just perfect. Our waking mind is like the complex surface of the ocean. It's not the deep, quiet swell of sleep, and it's not the single destructive tidal wave of a seizure. No, it's this beautiful, intricate dance of countless smaller ripples, the micro-knowledge, organizing themselves into larger, meaningful waves, the macro-knowledge. That's literally the rhythm of our thoughts.
Now, have you ever had that weird feeling of déjà vu? Of course you have. It's a perfect example of this delicate balance getting tipped just for a second. We've all felt it, but what is it really?
Well, according to this model, déjà vu is what they call a partial macro resonance. It's a brief flash where a new experience accidentally triggers this widespread feeling of familiarity across the brain, But, and this is the key part, without actually pulling up the specific memory. You get that feeling of knowing, but none of the details.
So you can basically break it down into 3 steps. First, your brain perceives a new scene. Second, the pattern of that scene almost matches a stored pattern, one of those micro-knowledge motifs in its vast library. And third, that near miss is enough to fire off a familiarity signal, but without giving you the who, what, and where of a real memory. It's like a resonance echo.
Section 4, a new model of mind. Okay, so this all sounds really cool, right? But how does it go from being a fascinating idea to something scientists can actually test in a lab?
And that's the most crucial point here. This whole resonance continuum thing, it's not just a neat metaphor or some philosophical idea, it's a real scientific hypothesis, one that makes specific, measurable predictions about how the brain should actually behave.
And the cool thing is, scientists can actually test these ideas. They can use things like EEG to measure brainwave coherence in different states. They can study epileptic patients to watch that transition from micro to macro knowledge happen in real time. They can even gently nudge the brain's resonance using stimulation to see what happens. And they can build complex computer models to simulate the entire system, from one end of the spectrum to the other.
So if you take one thing away from all of this, let it be this. Consciousness is a delicate balance. It's not some static, fixed thing. It is a constantly shifting, dynamic state that our brain has to actively work every single moment to maintain.
Yeah, our entire sense of self, everything we experience, it all exists in this incredibly narrow, vibrant space. It's that sweet spot right between the quiet, fragmented dispersal of deep sleep and the noisy, overwhelming collapse of a seizure.
And that, of course, leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. If our minds are constantly walking this tightrope of resonance, what does that mean for conditions where we lose that balance? And maybe even more profound, what could it possibly mean if we ever learn how to control it?